Well, good morning to you all. I hope you're all as well as can be. Maintaining wellness is sometimes challenging. Recently, it seems to be real challenging to maintain wellness and nurture oneself. I visited Facebook this morning and I saw a post. I can't remember exactly the verbiage. It was something like, those of us under 40 have a difficult task of explaining to our parents why we will never expect to see anything good ever again. Something like that. Those of us under 40 have the difficult task of explaining to our parents that we don't expect to see anything good ever again. I think the best word for that is despair. That was an expression of despair for the state of things. Understandable. It's the nature of samsara. So understandable, but nothing new in a sense. Humankind has gone through many samsaric turmoils in our history. We have a tendency to do that kind of thing. Samsara is a tornado. I've talked about samsara before. Samsara is a Sanskrit word, which is a word for the confusion of the suffering world. The world that is driven by the three unwholesome roots of greed, hate, and delusion. Samsara is a tornado. Etymologically, it has the meaning of whirling or spinning or turning. Thomas Cleary translates it as the mundane world. Mundane, the spinning world, the whirling world. And a tornado, if you've seen footage of tornadoes or cartoons of tornadoes, they have this tendency of sucking everything into its vortex. You can see cars and houses and cows and televisions that's spinning with a tornado. And so it's very easy to get sucked into samsara. It's very easy to get sucked into despair when we see manifestations of the world of confusion, of greed, hate, and delusion. And it's very easy to think, well, we'll never see anything good ever again. Things are really, really messed up. The samsara is a tornado that's got this pull. And Wednesday, it was pulling on me. And I saw the footage of what was taking place at the Capitol building. And, so it's got this very strong force that, it's very difficult to resist the temptation to spin along with it. And it takes, I feel, it takes a very clear inner commitment to not participate in greed, hate, and delusion, to make an effort to extricate oneself from that pull. And we don't always succeed. We're human. But we can remember and we can reset ourselves and remember a commitment to not go along with this spinning, this confusion that just leaves misery and suffering in its wake. What is the nature of that inner decision, inner commitment? And I'd like to talk about that a little bit this morning. There's a Japanese Zen priest, I think like 17th century, definitely after Dogen. I'm not too sure of his time, but Ryokan Daigu. He's a folk hero in Japan. He was a a thoroughly trained monk, trained in the monasteries and received Dharma transmission from his teacher. And then rather than go and set up a temple and teach, he built himself a hermitage, a little hut. He lived in his hut, Go On, what's the name of it. And he would just meditate in his hut and go into the village and beg for food and play games with the children and write poetry. That was Ryokan's life. He just did not have any real passion for institutional Zen. Once he received transmission, he did the rather unusual thing in Japan of being a hermit. In China, the tradition of hermits is quite strong, but in Japan, it never really became a main thing. It's rather strange, rather eccentric thing to do, to be a hermit in Japan. But that's what he did, Ryokan. And he wrote this many poems that I like. One poem he wrote, he said, to be a follower of the way is not difficult. One only needs the heart of Bodhisattva, never disparaging. To be a follower of the way is not difficult. The Buddha way is not difficult. One only needs a heart like Bodhisattva, never disparaging. So that's the poem, which doesn't mean much unless you know who Bodhisattva, never disparaging is. And I'm going to tell you who Bodhisattva, never disparaging is. I hope, am I speaking loud enough to come through? Somebody on Zoom maybe give a thumbs up, or am I fading out? I'm not sure. Doing okay so far? So Zoom folks, if you can't hear me, do a thumbs down or something to remind me to speak loud enough before I start to fade.
On your wire.
Oh. Yeah. Bodhisattva, never disparaging, is a character from the Lotus Sutra. There's a chapter entitled The Bodhisattva, never disparaging, or sometimes translated never despising. And just a little bit about Bodhisattva, never despising. Okay, I'll take it from here maybe. When the first thus come one, when the first Buddha, the very first Buddha, named King of Imposing Sound, had passed into extinction, and after his true Dharma had perished, in the midst of the counterfeit Dharma, bhikshus of overweening pride had great power. So setting the stage. According to Buddhist teaching, Buddhas come and they teach the Dharma, and it's strong for a while, and then it fades out and gets weak, and samsara, tornadoes, just pop up everywhere. When, after some time after the Buddha dies, the Dharma continues after their life for a certain period of time, and then grows weaker and weaker, and tornadoes of samsara start to flourish, and then another Buddha is born. And so that's a notion in Buddha of the declining Dharma. And so it's setting the stage at this ancient age of a declining Dharma, monks of overweening pride had great power. So egotism and hubris and megalomania and narcissism flourished. And during this time of flourishing pride and tornadoes of samsara, there was a Bodhisattva bhikshu named never disparaging. Oh, gainer of great strength, for what reason was he named never disparaging? Okay, so that's the question. Is in this time of turmoil, there was this monk practicing called never disparaging. Why was he given the name never disparaging? Whomever this monk saw, be it a monk, nun, or lay people, he would do obeisance to them. He would bow to them and utter praise, saying, I profoundly revere all of you. I dare not hold any of you in contempt. What is the reason? You are all treading the Bodhisattva path and shall succeed in becoming Buddhas. So this monk did not simply read and recite the scriptures, but rather bowed a lot. I'm rephrasing the sutra. He says paid obeisance, but bowed a lot, I would say, and uttered praise, saying, I dare not hold you all in contempt, since you're all to become Buddhas. So that was his practice. He would bow to everybody without exception, and say, I dare not despise you. You're on the Bodhisattva path. You're all going to become Buddhas. How could I not bow to you, since you're a Buddha to be, Well, that was his practice. He didn't just read scriptures and recite sutras. He bowed to everybody and revered everybody and refused to hold anyone in contempt. Okay, so he goes along and does this. And then when the fourfold multitude, the monks, nuns, lay women, lay men, that's the fourfold multitude. When they saw him, there were some who gave way to anger, whose thoughts were impure, who reviled him with a foul mouth, saying, this know-nothing monk, where does he come from? Who does he think he is? He himself says, I do not hold you in contempt. Yet he presumes to prophesy to us that we will succeed in becoming Buddhas. We have no need of such idle prophecies. So who does this guy think he is? Going around bowing like this and saying that we're going to be Buddhas, So they didn't think much of his practice. In this way, throughout the passage of many years, he was constantly subjected to abuse because of his practice of bowing to everybody. Yet he did not give way to anger, but constantly said, you shall become Buddhas. Somebody's cursing him, and saying all sorts of nasty things about him. So you're going to become Buddhas, bowing to, That was his response when they reviled him. When he spoke these words, some of the multitude would beat him with sticks and staves, with tiles and stones. He would run away and abide at a distance, yet he would still proclaim in a loud voice, I dare not hold you all in contempt. You shall all become Buddhas, as he's ducking behind a rock to avoid a stone. Since he constantly said these words, the overweening bhikkhu, bhikkhunis, monks, nuns, lay people, called him never disparaging. So that's from the Lotus Sutra, that's the story of Bodhisattva never despising, never disparaging. And I propose that as an example or an illustration of what it takes, what it actually takes to keep from being sucked into the tornado. Not an easy thing to do, to take the attitude of Bodhisattva, never despising, never thinking, refraining from thinking ill of another, given the behaviors that manifest. And I confess, I slip up and think ill now and again, especially Wednesday when I saw that footage and I saw what was going on, and I saw the guy with the horns and the body paint, the QAnon shaman. I had a lot of never disparaging thoughts for a while, but I'm endeavoring to reset myself and recognize that the temptation to disparage is that giant sucking energy of some sort, wanting to pull me in and play that game. And it's, it's especially difficult with demagoguery, when we see someone who deliberately manipulates the samsaric forces to accrue power for themselves. It's really hard not to disparage a person like that, who is deliberately causing tornadoes to pop up here, there, here. But that's just another manifestation of suffering sentient beings. So it's to take the inner disposition of Bodhisattva, never disparaging, is challenging work. Not because it's untrue or invalid, I feel, but because the energy of the tornado of samsara is so powerful that it wants to suck everything up with it. And when the tornadoes approach us, when circumstances of cruelty and abuse are in our proximity, the tendency to get enraged is strong because of the mundane world, that spinning power of suffering. But not because there is something flawed or wrong or incorrect about Bodhisattva never disparaging's perspective, but because of the power of samsara, the power of the confusion of the suffering world. Makes it difficult to maintain that clarity that Bodhisattva never disparaging is manifesting. Because I feel Bodhisattva never disparaging's perspective is aligned with a deep truth about Buddha nature, about who we actually are. And it's coherent with the understanding of our actual true nature. And so that's why it's important to try to understand our true nature and make an effort to cultivate the appreciation of true nature and bring it as much into our awareness as we can. And bowing is a great practice for that. More for that later. So I want to try to express what the Buddhist understanding of true nature is. And as I was reflecting on and preparing for this morning, I remembered how I would tell Jacob, my son, often when we were in the car driving places, we would be listening to the radio and we might hear some news or we'd be talking, and I would say, Jacob, and when he was like 5, 6, 7 years old, I started indoctrinating him in this. Because, Jacob, I feel there's no good and bad people. It's just, some people are profoundly confused. And in their profound confusion, they do things that they think are in their own best interest, but it's based on confusion. And then they hurt others and themselves in the process. But it's not based on being bad, it's based on confusion. Confusion of what's actually our true human nature. And as another thing that came to my mind as I was preparing to talk to you this morning is some years ago, actually it was post 9/11. So it was sometime in 2001, 2002, I met one of the co-founders of the Nonviolent Peace Force, for an organization that's still in existence. It has offices in St. Paul, actually. And this co-founder, I was talking with him, and he mentioned how he was with some of the civil rights activists during the civil rights era in the 60s. And they were doing sit-ins at segregated cafes in the South. Black people and others would come and engage in sit-ins. And he observed this one person was confronted, a white man was confronted by another man who brandished a knife and said, "I'm going to kill you right where you stand," something like that. And this peace worker said, "Well, I'm going to stand here and do my best to love you." And David said that he saw the man kind of like look back, the man brandishing the knife looked back at the other guy, and the knife hand started to tremble, and he kind of turned and walked away. That's an example of resisting the tornado. How can you actually take that position? What does it take? What kind of understanding does it take to confront the tornado of profound confusion, profound suffering, and the acrimony, the hatred that accompanies the tornado oftentimes? How do we maintain our full human presence in the midst of that? How did that guy do that? How did that guy who may have lost his life, say, "I'm going to stand here and do my best to love you," in the midst of this guy, threatening to kill him right there and then on the spot? How is that possible? And another example of confronting the tornado of human confusion and maintaining one's full humanity. There's this book that I came across called Amish Grace. Amish Grace is the title. It was a book about the nickel mines massacre, 2006. Amish community was struck when a deranged man went into an Amish schoolhouse and murdered, I think, like 6 Amish school children in their early teens. And that was a shocking bit of news, of course, but what actually happened afterwards became a bigger news story than the murders themselves, is how quickly the Amish community reached out and tried to comfort and console the man who killed the girls. He killed himself. And the Amish community, within hours of hearing the news, was going up to the widow of the murderer and trying to help her deal with what had happened and support her and forgive her and comfort her. And they attended the funeral, not only of their own children, but the Amish community members attended the funeral of the murderer. And in this book, they talked about, it's based on what Jesus said in the Gospels. If you do not forgive those who hurt you, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. Mm-hmm. And that has a psychological, that's the gospel rendition of it. But it has a psychological aspect that is best expressed in, I think, in this thing I once heard, that not forgiving is like drinking rat poison and waiting for a rat to die. Holding on to resentment, holding on to anger, poisons one's own heart. And it's like drinking rat poison to try to kill the rat. It's not going to work. You're hurting yourself. And so the whole book is basically expounding upon that aspect of forgiveness. And it also makes the point very, very strongly that this practice of forgiveness does not exculpate the conduct. It doesn't mean that there isn't consequences. A person still has to deal with the consequences of their actions. Forgiving them doesn't mean absolving them of the burden of dealing with the consequences of their actions. It means you don't add insult to injury. You don't spin that tornado faster by hating the person. But you know, they have responsibility, but they also are in need of love. Is what that book was trying to explain about Amish grace, about what occurred. So this capacity to withstand the tornado, samsara, is, I think, necessary for human beings to survive as a species and to evolve as a species. It's the one thing needed for hope. I feel is, if we succumb to the tornado, then we've abandoned hope. We have no ground for hope, because the tornado is going to suck us all, and we're all going to be in the vortex, hurting each other and hating each other. If we don't find within us some capacity to offer resistance to samsara, and it's based on understanding. And one of my favorite expounding of the understanding of true nature is in the Uttara Tantra Shastra. I've shared this before because I really, really like it. So I want to go over it again. And it goes in this presentation of true nature. It presents various points of Buddhist philosophy, and that some may be, it may be difficult to follow. And where I can, I'll offer some explanation, but I think I'll really try to elucidate the key points. And so don't worry too much if some of the concepts seem obscure. So here goes. It has been stated that conditioned phenomena in the myriad of beings are void in all aspects, while the entities of afflictions, karma, and their maturations resembling clouds, and so on. So this first quatrain says it's been taught that conditioned phenomena in the myriad of beings are empty. They have no substantiality. They're not real. They're illusory. And the entities of afflictions and karma, our programming, our conditioning, is also illusory. It drives us, but it's all just fabrication. It's all just a nightmare, a bad dream. Our conditioning is actually a bad dream. It's not real in the sense of solid. It's just something that we've bought into. So that's the first 4 verses. The afflictions, our sufferings, resemble clouds. Our sufferings have no basis in actual reality. Is what this is. This is a radical teaching. And the word radical means to get to the root of things. So it means, we suffer, but we suffer from illusion. But there's no authentic cause to our suffering. It's based on confusion. Remember, I told Jacob there are no bad people, just profoundly confused people sometimes, and they think they're pursuing their best interests when they're actually hurting themselves because they're confused. So this is another way of saying, the afflictions resemble clouds. Performance of actions is like the experience in a dream. And the skandhas are the 5 constituents of the human. The maturations of afflictions and karma are like the magical manifestation in an illusion. So these first 8 verses are basically saying that samsara is really a bad dream. You know, there ain't no good guys, there ain't no bad guys. We're just confused. We think there are demons out there, that it's our own mind creating the demons. And we hurt each other because we're projecting illusory content upon each other. That's my understanding basically of what's being said here, is that the maturation of afflictions and karma, this drama of antagonisms and good guys and bad guys, is all an illusion. We're creating nightmares for each other, for ourselves. That's what's being taught here. It was presented in this way, but in this ultimate continuum, in this Uttara Tantra here, it is explained that the basic element exists in order to relinquish the 5 falls. So he's saying, but you know, this is the Buddhist teaching, but in this Uttara Tantra, it says there is Buddha nature. Basic continuum means there is a Buddha nature, there is essential nature, there is true nature. There is something real. And this is kind of like a bit of Buddhist controversy. The Buddha nature school was criticized by other radical emptiness schools as being contradictory to emptiness. Don't worry too much about that. But that's kind of like what's being said here. In this teaching, it says there is essential nature, you know. But essential nature is taught in order to be able to relinquish the 5 flaws. Thus, not having heard about this, in some who are faint-hearted due to the flaw of self-contempt, the mindset for awakening does not arise. So you think, you know, if you think you are your karma, you are your actions, if you think you are your programming, you have low self-esteem. You know, because we've all done things that we may be ashamed of or regret. And if we cling to that as who we are, as our self-image, then the thought for being Buddha is foreign to us. And so that's the flaw of self-contempt, according to this. You know, you don't believe, you believe that what you've done is who you are. You believe that your programming and your karma is all you are. And that's the flaw of self-contempt, and the thought of liberation, the thought of freedom. It does not arise. Now it says further, even if some have given rise to bodhicitta, some say, oh no, that's not true. I have essential nature. I can, you know, I can be Buddha. And some, if they think that if they've awakened to bodhicitta, they become proud and think, I am superior. I know I'm Buddha, and they don't know they're Buddha, so I'm better than them because they don't know they're Buddha yet. And entertain the notion of inferiority about those in whom the bodhicitta has not arisen. You know. And those who think like that, perfect wisdom does not arise, because they cling to what is unreal and do not realize true reality. So that's the pivotal thing. They cling to what is unreal. What is unreal is the story that we're not Buddha in this context. And the story that that person is not Buddha, the story that that person thinks they're not Buddha, that's a flaw, and you stick to that, and you don't, like Bodhisattva never spiritual, you don't see their Buddha nature. You just see their flawed nature. So the flaws of sentient beings are unreal. Okay? And that's, you know, that's the radical teaching right here. The flaws of sentient beings are unreal. They're based on a lie. They're based on confusion. They're based on illusion. And so earlier I was talking about how do we maintain our presence of being in the midst of the tornado? How do we maintain our position when the tornado is whirling in our vicinity? How do we keep from being sucked into the tornado? Well, this is the radical sentence right here. The flaws of sentient beings are unreal. If you can start to see that, if you can start to have some faith born from experiential understanding that people behave the way they do because they believe stories. The people who assaulted the Capitol believed in what they were doing pretty passionately. They believed the lies that they'd been told. And they were putting their lives on the line. They were putting their safety on the line because they believed in something unreal. And so if you recognize that people are behaving because of their confusion, because of greed, hate, and delusion, then you won't demonize them. You'll see that the flaws are unreal. They're based on confusion. They're based on erroneous understanding of reality. The flaws of sentient beings are unreal because they are fabricated and adventitious. They're made up in their heads. What is real are the Buddha qualities whose nature is pure due to the identitylessness of these flaws. So what is real is our essential nature, which is ungraspable. To those whose minds cling to unreal flaws, to those whose minds see a jerk wearing horns and a painted face and deprecate the real qualities that someday you will be a Buddha, do not attain the love of seeing themselves and sentient beings as equal. So that's the heart of Bodhisattva and disparaging. He sees, he has the love of seeing himself and all sentient beings as equal. No one is worthy of disparagement. No one is worthy, deserving of thoughts of ill will towards them. If we think someone is deserving of our hatred, if we think someone is deserving of our resentment, our ill will, we're clinging to what is unreal. We're buying into the nightmare. We're being the tornado was sucking us in. We see things from our own side. We don't see the inner confused state that's prompting the behavior that we're despising. If we saw the inner confused state, we would see the suffering of that being. And the appropriate, reasonable response would be one of compassion. We would see the confusion and the lack of any peace, relative peace in that person. But Bodhisattva never despises it, attains the love of seeing themselves and all sentient beings as being equal, as being Buddha. However, so those whose minds cling to unreal flaws of arrogance, of self-righteousness, of hostility, of hatred, and deprecate the real qualities, precious human being in a state of confusion. They do not attain the love of seeing themselves and sentient beings as equal. However, due to having heard this, there arise in them who do attain the love great ardor, respect for all as a teacher, wisdom, and great love. Then through the arising of these 5 qualities, they lack self-contempt, regard all as equal, are free from flaws, possess the Buddha qualities, and cherish themselves and sentient beings, all sentient beings equally, thus attaining Buddhahood swiftly. So there's one verse, that I wanted to point out. However, having heard this, there arises in them great ardor, great, what's the Sanskrit? This is escaping. One of the paramitas is heroic enthusiasm. Ardor. Virya, thank you. Yeah, Virya, Prajna Paramita, great ardor and respect for all as a teacher. So that's a basic Buddhist practice, is to see all beings as your teacher, especially those who push your buttons, especially those who tend to trigger you. So for me, that guy wearing the horns and the painted face, the QAnon shaman, I need to set him up as one of my teachers. He points for me to the place where I need to work. If I want to cultivate some presence that can be resistant to the tornado, because for some reason Wednesday he got to me something about his zeal really pissed me off. Forget my language. So he should be a teacher for me. And if my commitment to the path is rigorous and sincere, he's a resource for me. This is a very important point. Easy to forget, but if we remember it and if we cultivate it, then we have very powerful resources for our practice. And it can be intriguing. You can get to the point where it's intriguing how our enemies, our quote unquote enemies, are our best teacher. Jesus knew this. Jesus knew this. He said, love your enemies. If you love your friends, everybody does that. No big deal. But if you want to understand God's love, love your enemies. Then you'll get some insight into God's love, because God rejects no one. I think that's what Jesus taught. Christianity doesn't really suit with that very well sometimes. But I thought, I think that was the vision of Jesus. Is, if you want to understand God's love, you cannot reject a single being. Love your enemies. Just, bless those who persecute you. If you really want to crack open your heart into the vastness of God's love, here's the way. And so that is not easy to do, but if we want to cultivate the gravity of presence that can withstand the tornado, this is the exercise that can give us a strength of heart that won't be spun around by the vicissitudes of our world. So that was Bodhisattva never despising his practice. People were calling him names and shouting abuse at him, and he'd say, I cannot ever despise you. You're Buddha. I honor you. They were throwing sticks and stones at him. He would duck behind a rock. I will never despise you. And it's based on understanding of our essential nature. That we all possess the jewel. We all possess the jewel of awareness. We're alive. And we're a manifestation of this precious cosmic event called human consciousness. We're possessors of this jewel of the universe coming into awareness of its own being. we are in an instance of the manifestation. How do I want to phrase this? We're an instance, each one of us separately is an instantiation, an instance of the manifestation of the universe coming into awareness of itself. That's one way I like to express the jewel of our true nature. We're each of us an instance of the manifestation of the universe coming into awareness of itself. I stole this from a cosmologist, but I think it's a wonderful expression. A non-Buddhist way of expressing the limitless potential of our true nature. That's, Buddha means awake. Buddha, the Sanskrit root Bud is awake. And the Buddha is the awakened one. And the story that somebody quotes the Buddha says, who are you? Are you a god? No. Are you a prophet? No. Well, what are you then? I'm awake, is what the Buddha responded. That was his only claim, was that he was awake. And I offer this as one way of defining what that means. An instance of the manifestation of the universe, the entire universe becoming aware of itself in the human is our jewel, which all of us possess. No one is excluded from that, but it's got accretions of all kinds of crap. Of this is who I am, and this is who you are, and this is who that guy is, and so it's crunched down into this small little identity of self and other, which is the fundamental delusion in Buddha Dharma. To think that, this sense of separation, defining ourselves according to limited perspectives. And Bodhisattva, never disparaging, would try to break through that shell of limitation by bowing to everybody as an instance of the manifestation of the universe becoming aware of itself. Of Buddha. You are Buddha, I bow to you. I choose not to believe the proliferation of manifestations of confusion as essentially real. It's all part of a bad dream, and I'm going to endeavor to wake up from it. So bowing was Bodhisattva never despising his practice, never disparaging his practice, based on an understanding of essential nature. Bowing is a practice of remembering the essential nature. When you bow, Buddha bows to Buddha. When you bow, Buddha bows to Buddha. When you bow, you're being bowed to. In the refuges that we chant, each one begins before all being. What's the first one? Nate or Carl? Before all being. Take refuge in Buddha. Before all beings. Immersing body and mind deeply in the way. Awakening true mind. Take refuge in Dharma before all being. Entering deeply the merciful ocean of Buddha's way. Take refuge in Sangha before all being, bringing harmony to everyone, free from hindrance. So these are the refuge verses that we chant when we bow, and each one begins before all being, or another way of saying that is with all beings. So when you bow, just like Bodhisattva never disparaging, you're bowing to everybody. You're not bowing. Those on Zoom can't see, I'm pointing at the Buddha on the altar. You're not bowing to a statue on the altar. You're bowing to all beings. Each bow is a bow to all beings, honoring each instantiation of Buddha's awakening. It's not paying obeisance to something higher than you. It's awakening your own true nature by seeing the true nature in all beings. And that's a real important secret. One who I heard put something like this: the person who's awake doesn't go around thinking, hey man, I'm awake, I'm cool, I'm wonderful. A person who's awake, look at all these amazing beings. You know, wow, look at these wonderful, beautiful beings. That was one way I heard somebody express the nature of awakening. It's not some egoic thing. It's some power you possess that makes you feel inflated. Of course, it's a humbling thing where you see how wondrous each and every being is. That's how to awaken your true nature. The most efficacious way to cultivate an appreciation of your true nature is to endeavor to see the Buddha nature in others. That's much more efficacious than to be self-obsessed and always analyzing every nook and cranny of your own personality and behavior. That, you know, there may be some work that needs to be done on one's personality and behavior, but that's preparatory work for launching out and trying to perceive the Buddha nature of all beings. And that's the work that will cultivate your own Buddha nature, the endeavor to see the precious Buddha nature in others. That's the way, the true way, the way in which you can have confidence in pursuing Buddhahood. What things say, pursuing Buddhahood. But to have confidence in how you're pursuing Buddhahood is pursue it in others. Pursue it, say, awaken the desire to understand, like Ryokan says, to understand the heart of Bodhisattva and disparaging. Learn how to see how precious beings actually are, in spite of what their confusion is compelling them to manifest. You know, that's why loving your enemies is a great path if you really want to awaken the vast heart within. So that's another way of talking about bowing. That was my endeavor this morning, was to talk about bowing as a practice. Some time ago during seminars, I was recommending, if you're comfortable bowing as a practice, that you include it, in your daily meditation, before and after. And this morning I mentioned the verses that you could recite either out loud or silently to yourself if you choose. And I said that I would demonstrate the Soto Zen way of bowing. And I'm not saying that you have to do this, or you have to do it this way. But if I personally find the practice of bowing, very powerful. A little autobiographical, parenthetical comment about that before I demonstrate the bow. I spent my years in high school as a Jesus freak. Very, in the Jesus movement of the 70s, I was involved. And I felt a connection to Jesus, but I never felt much connection to the practice of prayer. There's something felt stilted, awkward. It didn't feel genuine to me, verbal prayer. I tried to do it both corporately, with others and privately, but it never really caught on. But still, I had this devotional heart. Then years later, in my early 30s, I was a visitor at Tassajara Zen Mountain Center. Before I was practicing Buddhism, I went to visit them. And I saw people bowing there. And I was invited to join the meditation and the service, and they instructed us in the bowing. And the minute I bowed, I found my form of prayer. It just felt right to me. I met, some people have difficulties with bowing. They feel like, they're like obasing themselves before some authority, or they have other issues with bowing, and they have to struggle to find their way with bowing. For me, that was never the case. And I just want to share that with you, because there may be others that find bowing to be, that nonverbal practice to be a very effective way of practice of prayer. But it may not be for everybody, and so I'm not trying to compel you to bow. But I wanted to, since bowing is a very integral part of Buddhist practice and other traditional practices, I wanted to give a presentation on it. And if it's something that is meaningful for you, then you can incorporate it into your daily meditation. Okay, so let me demonstrate for you the Soto Zen way we have of bowing. How are we doing? Do we have, are you chopping my head off?
Got you from the waist up.
Okay. So, but you'll need to see the floor too. So. Get the camera back a little bit.
Tip it when we get there.
Yeah. Okay, so you start with the hands in this posture called gasho. Gasho is just Japanese for hands together. That's what the word gasho means. This is the gasho. And then you go to your knees. And if you need to use a hand to help you, you can. But the pure form, if you will, would be to go down, keep your hands in gasho. Then you lower your forehead to the floor and the hands, palms up, and you touch your forehead to the floor and lift the palms slightly, about a couple inches off the floor, keeping them parallel to the floor and lowering them and coming back up. Once again, you'll start with the palms together. You go down to your knees, and then forehead to the floor, palms up like this, and back down, and back up. So that is the form for bowing. And Jacob told me he found the story about that some person saw the Buddha wanting to cross a muddy place, and the person said, "Here, let me, walk on my hands, and I'll help you cross the muddy pit." And that was the significance of raising the hands as you're lifting the Buddha. Once again, Buddha is not separate from you. So when you're lifting Buddha, you're honoring your own true nature. You're not lowering yourself to something superior to you, but you're awakening the jewel you already possess. That's the spirit of bowing. Okay, I think that's it for this morning. So thank you for coming, and I hope to see you Thursday at 6:30 this coming week.